Good morning, everyone. This is Laura Griffin in the Special Revenue Department at Region 10, and we are here this morning to provide a webinar on the 2018-2019 ESSA Consolidated Compliance Report. We're going to start out just by showing you where to find this report in eGrants. So when you're in eGrants, you'll go to Compliance Reports. And then as you see, at the bottom of this screen is the 18-19 ESSA Consolidated Compliance Report. The first thing that you will need to complete is the contact information. So you'll click into this schedule, enter contact information for your district or LEA as appropriate. Also, I want to point out that during this webinar today, we are not going to cover the migrant schedule, the Title I Part C, nor are we going to cover the Title I Part D schedule, simply because we have relatively few LEAs that would actually be completing those. If you are a member of the migrant SSA in your LEA, the migrant SSA will be completing that schedule on your behalf. So we are going to start this morning with the PR 1000, and Vanessa Delacroix will be giving you information on that schedule.
Hi there, everyone. This is Vanessa, and as Laura said, we're going to talk about the Title I Part A PR 1000. Okay, with the PR 1000, there are 7 parts to it. And part 1 is estimated expenditures from Title I Part A funds reserved at the LEA level. You'll complete this part to report on the estimated expenditures from Title I Part A funds that are reserved at the LEA level for the 18-19 school year. If your LEA has obligated funds that are not actually expended, include a best estimate of what the total expenditures will be for each line. Line 1 is LEA's parental involvement activities. As a reminder, a minimum of 1% is required if the current year entitlement is over $500,000. At least 95% of that 1% must be allocated to Title I Part A campuses. I'm sorry, that was 90%. At that 90% of the 1% is over and above the regular Title I Part A campus allocation. Number 2 is Title I Part A services to eligible private nonprofit school students, not including administrative costs. Any administrative costs for these activities should be included in line 4. 0 is an acceptable response here. For number 3, that's where you'll put your estimated expenditures for preschool programs from funds reserved at the LEA level. Again, 0 is an acceptable response. The 4th one is for the administration of Title I Part A programs, including administration of Title I Part A programs for eligible private school students and students at facilities for neglected and delinquent. Number 5 is for LEA professional development activities. Then for 6, you have estimated expenditures for services to homeless students attending campuses not served by Title I Part A. Do not include administrative costs here. Those would be included on line 4. And 0 is, again, an acceptable response. The 7th one is services to students residing in local facilities for the neglected. As before, administrative costs do not go here. They go on line 4, and 0 is acceptable. And 8 is services to students residing in local facilities for the delinquent. Put any administrative costs, any administrative costs on, you guessed it, line 4, and you may also put 0 here. 9 is for expenditures for transportation for foster care children. This may be 0. And 10, if you had other expenditures for Title I Part A funds for the LEA level activities that are not included, type the estimated expenditures and a description of the activities. All right, moving on, part 2. If your organization had at least one school-wide campus, as indicated in the SC 5000 of the ESSA Consolidated grant application, this part is available. You put the estimated total Title I Part A expenditures from school-wide campus budgets. For Part 3, this part is available if your organization had at least one targeted assistance campus on your SC 5000. You'll put the estimated total of Title I Part A expenditures from targeted assistance campus budgets. Moving on to Part 4, it is parental involvement activities, and this is required for LEAs with an allocation of less than $500,000. So this section is applicable to LEAs that were not required to reserve funds in Part 1 for parental involvement. You'll enter the amount of Title I Part A expenditures for parental involvement activities that are not included in Part 1, Number 1. If the expenditure is zero, you'll need to provide an explanation. All right, Part 5, student participation. So depending upon the responses in Part 2 or on the SC 5000 of the ESSA Consolidated grant application, one or more of the columns in this part may be disabled. Complete the enabled columns to report on student participation in the programs and for the types of facilities. For school-wide programs and targeted assistance programs, only report students ages 0 to 2 and 3 to 5 that receive Title I Part A services. Those students in those age ranges are not in PEDS. The TEA will then use the PEDS data for students enrolled and identified as receiving Title I Part A services. Here you will type the number of students who receive Title I Part A services in each program. So enter the number of student participants by grade who receive Title I Part A services. Then you will enter the number of male and female student participants who receive Title I Part A services in each applicable program. And in the last section of this part, you'll type the number of students by ethnicity who receive services in each program. And very importantly, your totals under grade, gender, and ethnicity must match. Okay, let's move on to Part 6, Program Implementation. You'll complete this section to indicate your compliance with the program requirements. For each requirement listed, you'll select yes, no, or NA to indicate whether you complied with the requirement. If you select yes, you will then check to indicate the sources of documentation you have readily available to document that compliance with the requirement. If some other situation applies, check other and explain. If you click no or NA for any of the requirements, you'll need to provide an explanation of your answer in the explanation of compliance status box. If you select no, explain the reason for non-compliance. Do not select no if a requirement is not applicable to your LEA. If you select NA, explain why the requirement is not applicable to you. And the requirements are, you have at the top here, the first one, you have program coordination and integration. There are 2 questions under this requirement. The next one is your needs assessment. And that, again, there are 2 questions here. The third part is parental involvement, and there are a bunch of questions here. I think you have 8 questions over this requirement. So scrolling down, you come to program evaluation, and that has the 1 question. And the last section here is on supplement, not supplant, where you will indicate if you have a supplement, not supplant methodology or a statement of exemption. All right, the last part for Title I Part A is optional. So if you wish to provide additional information, space is provided for your convenience. If you select the other for a type of service offered to homeless students, you'll explain that here. Okay, and that does it for Title I Part A. After this section, we move on to the PR 3000, Title II Part A, and Dr. Amber Reed is going to go over that section with you.
Good morning. The PR 3000, Title II Part A. is to report funds for supporting effective instruction. You will only report those expenditures with activities paid with Title II Part A funding during the compliance report grant year. Funds utilized from other programs through REAP and funding transferability should be included in the expenditures amount of Title II Part A. Part 1 is funding transferability. Funding transferability allows LEAs the ability to participate to transfer a certain percentage of non-administrative funds allocated to them for allowable uses under Title I Part A, Title I Part C, Title I Part D, Title III Part E, Part A, ELA and Immigrant, Title IV Part A, and Title IV Part D. Please click yes or no to indicate whether you are participating in funding transferability with program with Title II Part A funds. If you click no, Part 1 collapses and you'll continue to Part 2. If you click yes, you are transferring funds from Title II Part A. Type the percentage of those funds redirected into each source identified with the respective columns. The sum of all columns may not exceed 100%. The amount of Title II Part A funding redirected under funding transferability that was expended. If you transferred funds out of Title II Part A, enter the dollar amount of those funds being redirected into each fund source identified in the columns above and make sure that they match the percentage that was inputted in the percentage transferability. Part 2, Section 5211, Rural Education Achievement Programs. Rural Education Achievement Programs, also known as REAP, assist LEAs in addressing academic needs more effectively by giving them greater flexibility in the use of federal resources. Only eligible LEAs can use the REAP options. If the total under the alternate use of funding in Part 2 add up to 100%, or the combined totals of alternate use fundings in Part 2 under funding transferability in Part 1 add up to 100%, then Parts 3 and 4 will be disabled. Just as in Part 1, if you click no, the Part 2 collapses and you can move on to Part 3. If you click yes, you will identify the percentage of Title II Part A fundings redirected under REAP. After you identify the percentage, you will identify the amount of Title II Part A fundings redirected under REAP. Again, the columns may not exceed 100%. Part 3, Program Expenditures and Activities Participation. If this part is enabled, you need to complete it. Under the LEA, you will type the amount of Part A funds expended or encumbered under this activity. If you did not expend any expenditures, you will type 0 under Part A for LEA as well as the number of staff. Now, question 1. If Title II Part A funds were expended or encumbered for improving the instructional leadership capacity of principal supervisors to coach and develop principals, in the LEA column, enter the amount of Title II Part A funds expended or encumbered for this activity. Type 0 if no Title II Part A funds were expended or encumbered. In the number of staff column, enter the number of staff for whom Title II Part A funds were expended and encumbered for this activity. You'll do that for questions 1, 2, 3, 4. Once you get to question number 5, it adds a different part. Question number 5. Title II Part A funds were expended or encumbered for professional development that improves classroom instruction or student learning. In the LEA column, you will continue to enter the number of Title II Part A funds expended or encumbered for this activity for the LEA. Type 0 if no Title II Part A funds were encumbered or expended. The private non-private column is available to be filled out of this section. If the Pnp column is applicable, you will enter the amount of Title II Part A funds expended or encumbered for this activity for participating Pnp schools. Type 0 if no Title II Part A funds were encumbered for the Pnp as well. In the staff column, enter the number of staff, including the LEA and Pnps as applicable, for whom Title II Part A funds were expended for this activity. For 6 and 7, you will continue to type in the LEA column the amounts of funds that were expended or encumbered. If the number is 0, type 0, and number of staff that participated in those. It is important to note that there is a misalignment between the PS 3104, the application, and the compliance report. Use your best judgment when aligning the programmatic pieces. If you have additional questions, please contact us at Region 10. Part 4, Program Implementation. You will complete this section to indicate your compliance with the program requirements. For each program requirement listed, click Yes, No, or NA to indicate whether you comply with the requirement. Type an explanation to your answer in the explanation of compliance status box. If you click Yes, list the sources of documentation that you have readily available to document compliance with this requirement. If a date box is provided, type the date of the compliance with the requirement. If you click No, you must explain your reason for not being in compliance. Do not click No if the answer is NA. If the answer is not applicable, then you will click A, and then you will click NA, and then in the explanation explain why the requirement is not applicable. Part 5 is additional LEA data. If you wish to provide additional information, this space is provided for your convenience. This is optional. Next, we will have the PR 3002 Title 3 Part A by Lauren McKinney.
Greetings, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to go over the PR 3002 with you, which is the Title III Part A application. It's your ELA and immigrant. Now, historically, Jennifer Phillips, I had a brain fart, excuse me guys, Jennifer Phillips, who is in teaching and learning, would go over the 3002 with you because all things Title III Part A would go through her. She's not able to be with us today, so I am going to cover some of this with you. Now, as you go through the 3002, if there are additional questions that you have that are not covered through our time together or through the instructions piece of the eGrants application, feel free to reach out to Jennifer because she's going to be your primary contact as pertains to Title III Part 2, ELA and immigrant. So let's go over this. I do want to point out again, as with every PR program schedule or report, there is an instructions tab here in the upper right corner. So if you ever need a little bit more detail, you can always click on that and it will go over it with you. So the first part, Part 1, Expenditure for Supplemental Language Instruction, Educational Programs and Activities Implemented. If you had any activities that you set aside funding for upgrades to your program objectives, your instructional materials, tutorials of any kind that were supplemental in nature, language instruction education program that's also coordinated with other programs, either federal or state, community partnership, or any additional resources, you would actually type in your expenditure amount here. It is going to pre-calculate for you at the bottom, so everything in this gray tab is going to be a total of all of the figures that you type in here as you go along with the form. Part 2, expenditures for supplemental PD. If you had any additional supplemental professional development activities that were set up so that your support staff or your teaching staff could be of better service to your students, you are going to put in that amount there, and again, it'll pre-calculate for you at the bottom. Now, Part 3 goes specifically into immigrant funds. At this point, if you did not have any Title III Part A immigrant funding that was accepted by your LEA to implement during the 18-19 year, do not put in anything in the immigrant funds category. Just leave that blank. Now, there are some things that you see here that are recommended and acceptable usages of the funding per statute. So, for example, family literacy, parent outreach, and training. You should have, if you received immigrant funding, done some type of activity or strategies or programs specific to numbers 1 through 7. If you had some funding amounts associated with that, again, you'll type that in here at the bottom. It will pre-populate for you. Part 4 goes into the specific language instruction for your educational programs. Did you offer a newcomer program? If you did, that's a yes or no. Did you offer a bilingual program? Again, you'll click either yes or no. If you said yes and you did offer a bilingual program, here you have the option of typing in what kind of specific program you offered. So did you do a transitional bilingual program with an early exit or a late exit? Did you do a dual language immersion, two-way or one-way program? If so, then want you to clarify or specify which languages you offer those programs in. So if it was Spanish, I click Spanish. But let's also say that I have a high Vietnamese population within my LEA that we serve. I would click there, and then next to other, type in Vietnamese, okay? If any other languages we offered a bilingual or dual language immersion program in, you're going to follow that same thing. Just make sure you click the box and then type in what specific language you offered. Now, when we're referring to the types of ESL program models that are available to you, you can select here whether or not you utilize content-based or pull out ESL. Part 5 is very brief, as you see. There are 3 portions here. And this is specific to the teacher information. So those that are being of service to your students through the Title III Part A, ELA, and or immigrant program. So number 1 and number 2 sound very similar, but they are different. Number 1 says, type the number of certified and or licensed teachers serving in your language instruction education programs that you have throughout your LEA. So let's say I have 50. I type in 50 there next to the number of teachers. Number 2 says type the number of teachers serving in a LAIP under our bilingual exception and or ESL waiver. So that's slightly different. It's just because I have 50 serving in the original LAIP program doesn't mean I'm going to have 50 that are also serving, but only through an exception or a waiver. That may be only 10. So once you see that, I don't want you to think that number 1 and number 2 are asking the same things. It's slightly different details. Number 3 is asking you to estimate the number of certified and or licensed teachers that you project you may need within the next 5 years. That's not including your teachers from this year. That's going forward in the next 5 years. How many additional teachers do I think, or how many teachers do I think I'll need, period, to serve our bilingual / ESL programs? Part 6, needs assessment. Did you determine that all of your teachers serving in that program are fluent in both English and any other language that were used for instruction? I'm going to read off of, at this point, some of the instruction detail, because again, this is typically covered by Jennifer Phillips in our teaching and learning program. So I wanted to be able to point out to you, there are a couple of very rare reasons as to why you may select NA. So for this very first one that's asking about the needs assessment portion, according to the program guide for our compliance, it says the only reason why you would select NA for number 1 there would be if you as the LEA was not required to provide a bilingual program. And that's only going to be per your statewide requirements for bilingual instruction, or if you receive a waiver to operate that or a TEA bilingual exception for the 18-19 year from the agency itself. Other than that, there should be a yes there. So if you selected yes, showing that you're in compliance, and that's box immediately below, you're just going to type in a couple of documentation pieces that you have should you be asked by the agency to supply it through an audit or a validation of some kind. Engagement activities, numbers 2, 3, and 4. I know that the last couple of years, that's been kind of a hot spot within the Title III Part A world because it's separated into parent engagement, family engagement, community engagement. Again, if you select yes, go ahead and use these boxes below, numbers 2, 3, and 4, to indicate which specific things you did in order to meet that compliance piece there. Just as an FYI, if you look into the program guidance, it says that it is highly unlikely that an LEA receiving funds under these parts, so Title III Part A, could justify a compliance status of NA in response to numbers 2, 3, or 4. And that's partially because it's required in statute that you do parent engagement, family engagement, and community engagement. If you have additional questions as pertains to what that level of engagement looks like, again, please reach out to Jennifer Phillips. Administrative costs, numbers 5 through 7. It says, did the LEA meet the statutory limitation on administrative costs? So that's a yes, a no, or an NA. I also want to share with you what the program implementation guidance stated. If you selected NA, they want you to say very specific things. In fact, it even tells you down to the line, quote and period, what you should select there. So for number 5, for example, it says the LEA should write the following. LEA or fiscal agent did not use Title III Part A ELA funds for administrative costs. So if this does not apply, 5, 6, or 7 does not apply to you, I highly recommend that you look at the Guide to Program Implementation Questions specific to Title III Part A, because it will tell you what you should say as pertains to the 2% set aside, the Egger cost principles, which are number 6, and then number 7 when you're looking at your third-party contractor. Moving down to usage of funds, 8 through 12. Again, I want to remind you that if for any reason you had to select that it was not applicable to you, there are very specific words that the agency recommends that you put in here if you are unable to say that, yes, you fully engaged in this and you were compliant with this portion of the Title III Part A program. Administrative costs repeats itself under immigrant program, which is number 13. And as a reminder, if you did not accept immigrant funding, you would just say NA because it would not apply to you at that time. So within the box, you would specify you did not accept that funding source. Use of funds for immigrant as well wraps up numbers 14 through 16. If you had any staff that were split funded with other funds maintaining appropriate time and effort, then you would select yes. And then you would also document in the boxes below what you did for the 18-19 year that you could supply as an artifact should you be audited or validated by the agency. At this point, this is the end of the Title III Part A compliance report specific to ELA and immigrant. Should you have additional questions as you comb into this and as you've had an opportunity to look into the instructions portion of this document, please reach out to Jennifer Phillips. At this time, I'm going to take you back to the primary page. I didn't make any changes, so I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to turn this over to Laura Griffin, who's going to cover the PR 3099 with you, which is the PNP portion of the report.
Hello again, everyone. All right, first of all, before we dive into this schedule, I want to remind you that those of you, first of all, charters, you will not have this schedule because charters don't do PNP. Also, then, those of you who are members of our SSA at Region 10 or who are members of the PNP Cooperative, I will be sending information for this schedule to you. So you will not be having to figure this out all on your own. We will get this to you well ahead of the compliance report deadline. So to start out, as you look at the schedule, you have to indicate the number of private nonprofit schools within boundaries. That does include any PMPs who are not participating. This is a total number of all the PMPs within the boundaries of your district. And then the next question asks if you have how many PMPs outside of your boundaries had eligible Title I students. Okay, so 2 numbers there at the beginning, and then it's going to ask you, did PNP schools participate? If you click no, then you can see it's going to gray out certain sections for that program as you go along. So you'll pick a yes or a no for each program. On line 2 here, they want you to put the number of participating PNP schools that received equitable services for each program. And then on line 3, the number of eligible PNP students that received equitable services. For Title II Part A, that's obviously going to be a number of staff. Students do not receive Title II Part A services. For Title IV Part A, just know that it is very common there sometimes to have the entire enrollment in the PNP. For example, if the PNP utilized the funds for Title IV to have an anti-bullying program that involved the whole school, that may be the whole student body that's represented in that box. So you may end up with a pretty high number on Title IV, but that's okay. Moving on to the program implementation questions. It asks a question and then you give a response for each individual program in which you had PNP participation. So the first one, did the LEA conduct timely and meaningful consultation? Some of your examples of your yes compliance status there might be your affirmations of consultation, meeting notes or agendas, emails, just different things that show your timely and meaningful consultation with the PMPs. Sliding on down to the next program implementation question. Did the LEA maintain local control of all applicable program funds? In this one, your evidence of compliance might be inventory records. It may be some of your financial records, expenditure logs, these kind of things, showing that the LEA did maintain local control of the program funds. Moving down to the third program implementation question. This is documentation of the equitable services amount used, and detailed explanation is available for all participating programs. So again, here we're looking at some of your financial records. Your application should show the equitable services amount that was available, but then we would need something here to show how it was actually expended. So this may be financial ledgers, it may include purchase orders, different things like that, but documentation of that equitable services amount that was used under each program. Now the next question sounds almost the same, but there's one word different. This one is documentation of equitable services administration amount used. Okay, so this is just asking for documentation of the administration cost of providing equitable services. So this one is a little bit trickier. On Title I Part A, for example, let's imagine that you used a third-party contractor that had administrative costs that went along with that. So you could put, as an example, invoices that reflect the admin services cost. You could also include here notes from your consultation that show that you revealed to the private nonprofit school what portion of their set-aside amount was going for admin costs. But on a lot of these programs, you're going to want to put an NA, but there's no NA there. It has to be yes or no. So if you didn't expend any funds on equitable services administration, don't put no, okay? Yes, but then explain that there were no funds expended on the administration of equitable services. And again, I'll be sending all of you who are in the PNP cooperative something to guide you as you're completing this schedule, as well as information to help you as you're completing your Title I Part A schedule, the part where it asks about the amount spent on private nonprofit schools and the number of students served. And then also there's a little part on that Title II schedule that Amber Reed went over that requires knowing how many private school teachers participated, some things like that. Region 10 will be sending you information for those as well. So if you have any questions about PNP, please do call either me, Laura Griffin, or Amber Reed, and we will be happy to assist you with this schedule. So we are going to now move on to Title IV Part A, and you will have Amber Reed again assisting you with this schedule.
Hello again. I am back for the PR 3107, Title IV Part A. Title IV Part A is student-supported academic enrichment. You will use these reports to show how you utilize the Title IV Part A funds. You will use zeros again when the items do not apply. And you will report only those expenditures and activities paid with Title IV Part A funding during this compliance report grant year. Part 1, funding transferability. Funding transferability allows again the LEAs to participate in transfer some percentage of non-administrative funds allocated to them for allowable uses under Title I Part A, Title I Part C, Title I Part D, Title II Part A, Title III Part A, ELA and Immigrant, and Title IV Part B. Click yes or no to indicate whether you participate in the funding transferability with Title IV Part A funds. If you click no, Part 1 collapses and you can go to Part 2. If you click yes, you will complete the percentage of Title IV Part A fundings redirected under funding transferability, and you'll place the percentage that you transfer into each account, into each column. Note, the sum may not exceed more than 100%. Next, you will actually place the amount, the dollar amount of the funds transferred, and make sure that they're aligned with the percentage account. If you transfer funds out of Title IV Part A, the dollar amounts of each fund source are identified with the respective columns above. Part 2, the REAP again. Again, only eligible RLEAs can participate. Under the percentage of Title IV Part A funding redirected, you'll put the percentage in these columns. Again, if the percentage cannot add up to more than 100%. And under the fund source, you'll put the amount, dollar amount expended, and make sure they align with the percentage. Part 3, expenditure use of funds. You will enter the estimated total Part A, Title IV Part A expenditures into the following categories. 1, direct administrative costs, the exact amount. 2, well-rounded education. 3, safe and healthy schools. 4, the effective use of technology and technology. And 5, technology infrastructure. Enter the amounts into the columns. If you receive more than $30,000, you must use at least 20% for the well-rounded education, at least 20% for the safe and healthy schools, and at least 20% for the effective use of technology. The technology infrastructure cannot be more than 15% of your support effective use in technology. Part 4, the program implementation. You will respond to each question appropriately with yes, no, or NA. If the response is NA, the LEA shall enter a descriptive narrative as to the explanation. Question 1, if you're receiving less than $30,000, did the LEA have a process to determine the program LEA needs? This is from statute. If you did, if you receive less than $30,000, then you will click yes, and you will put down what you used. If it is no, you'll click no, and you'll explain why you're not in compliance. If the answer is no, and it's because you received more than $30,000, you will put that there. We received more than $30,000, and then part 2 will be applicable to you. If you receive more than $30,000, then you conduct a CNA tied to the 3 goals of Title IV Part A. If you click yes, you'll check the boxes that show which ones you have readily available for compliance. A copy of your CNA, the description of strategy used to collect data regarding the needs, as well as the data identified to address the student's access to effective program activities, or other. If you did not complete a CNA, the answer is no. If it is because you received less than $30,000, you will put that in there. Question 3, did the LEA engage in timely and meaningful consultation with a broad range of stakeholders as part of their process in determining the target areas of improvement related to the student's access to effective program activities? Again, this is from statute, so you will click yes or no, and if it is no, you will explain why. As well as the same thing for for question 4. Did you prioritize the distribution of funds to the schools identified in one or more of the following? Please click yes or no. Well, part E says identified as persistently dangerous public elementary and secondary schools. That's part of statute, but we do not have any persistently dangerous or public elementary schools in Region 10. Again, if you click yes, you'll put down what compliance documents that you have, and you can put other documentation that you have. If it is no, you need to explain why. Implementation. Did the LEA identify and implement programs that increase access to educational opportunities for all students with disabilities, English learners, economically disadvantaged students, and students who are underrepresented or undeserved from statute? If the response is yes, you're going to check the district improvement plan, and your supporting data and your documentation should include the student populations that increase and the related programs or activities correlated to that increase. For other, you will provide, the LEA will show opportunities to list and or provide a description narrative as well as an explanation. All supporting compliance data or documentation shall be readily available upon request. If the compliance answer is no or NA, you shall enter a description narrative as for the explanation. Program evaluation. Did the LEA periodically evaluate the effectiveness of the programs and or activities based on the objectives and outcomes? This is again another thing for statute. If the response is yes, you shall check all that apply. The other box again provides the LEA an opportunity to list and or provide a descriptive narrative as an explanation. All supporting compliance data and or documentation shall be readily available. If the answer is no, the LEA shall enter a descriptive narrative as part of the explanation. Part 5 is additional LEA data that is optional. If you wish to provide additional information on your Title IV Part A spending, please put that there. Again, it is optional. Next, we will go to Deanna Sanchez, and she will complete the PR 6200.
Hello, I will be covering the PR 6200 School Choice Option Title IX, Part 1 LEA Report on Persistently Dangerous Schools. Did the LEA request any federal funds in 2018-19 under the Elementary Secondary Education Act as amended, yes or no? If you choose yes on the compliance report, make sure you have the type of auditable documentation readily available to support your selection. Next, were any students transferred from any campus due to the school being identified as persistently dangerous? If you answer no, line 3 is disabled. If yes, how many students transferred to another campus? Part 2, violent criminal incidents. Note, violent criminal acts are those reported under the Public Education Information Management System, PINCS, 425 Record Action, Reason Codes 17, 18, 19, 28, 30, 32, and 46. You will answer whether or not you had any violent criminal incidents on the campus. If you select no, line 2 in this part will be disabled. If yes, type how many violent criminal incidents occurred. Did the LEA have a victimized student? Answer yes or no. If you answer no, the rest of this part is disabled. Next, enter the number of victimized students whose parents requested a school transfer. Then enter the number of victimized students who were transferred to another campus. If the response to number 5 is less than number 4, that is, if your victimized students transferred, then requested a transfer under section 8532, type an explanation of the difference. Next, enter the number of campuses within LEA boundaries to which students identified in number 4 above transferred. Then enter the number of campuses outside the LEA boundaries to which students identified in number 4 above transferred. Part 3, Program Implementation Requirements, Coordination and Integration. The LEA, as a condition of receiving funds under the ESSA, established and implements a policy requiring that a student attending a persistently dangerous public elementary school or secondary school and a student who becomes a victim of a violent criminal offense while in or on the grounds of a public elementary or secondary school that the student attends is offered and allowed to attend a safe public elementary or secondary school within the local education agency, including a public charter school. Note, if another campus is not available within the LEA, the policy should provide for other types of services to ensure the safety of the student. In addition, the LEA should provide for other types of services to ensure the safety of the student. In addition, the LEA is encouraged to attempt to secure a cooperative agreement with another LEA to accept transfers when reasonable and appropriate. Select yes, no, or non-applicable. If compliance status is yes, check all that apply. Remember, checking a box ensures that the documentation is on file and readily available upon request. A charter school is a school of choice, but has to be able to provide other types of services to ensure the safety of the student. The selections are copy of policy approved by local board, documentation that any student who has been affected by either of these circumstances has been offered the opportunity to transfer. Other, B, if compliance status is no or non-applicable, complete the explanation of compliance status 500. Oh, sorry, not 500. Part 3, program implementation continued. The LEA notified parents that their students may transfer and attend a safe public elementary or secondary school within the local education agency, including a public charter school for students who are enrolled in a persistently dangerous school. Notification was made within 14 calendar days of the start of the school year. Students who are victims of a violent criminal act. Notification made within 14 calendar days of the incident. If compliance status is yes, check all that apply. Remember that checking the box ensures that you have documentation on file and readily available. This is the selections, or these are the selections. Copy of written notification procedure, list of campuses identified as persistently dangerous schools, violent criminal acts, discipline reports available through the link listed, letters to parents of any student who has been affected by either of these circumstances, documenting the offer of the opportunity to transfer, and other. There you will explain any other situations. If compliance status was non-applicable, select reason below. No other reason for non-applicable is acceptable. The selection is the LEA had no campuses identified as persistently dangerous schools, and the LEA had no students who were victims of a violent crime. If compliance status is no, complete the explanation of compliance status. If the LEA consolidates administrative funds for ESSA programs, the LEA does not use any other funds under the ESSA programs included in the consolidation for administration for the fiscal year of consolidation. Select yes, no, or non-applicable. If the compliance status is yes, check all that apply. Again, ensure that you have the documentation on file and readily available. The selections are records showing consolidation of administrative funds, including names of programs included and amounts of funds contributed by each program. Records showing that no other ESSA program funds were used for administrative costs during that grant year. If compliance status is non-applicable, select the reason below. No other reason for non-applicable is acceptable. This response will be compared with the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant Application, Budget Summary and Report, Part 1, Available Funding, Consolidated Administrative Funds. The LEA does not consolidate administrative funds for ESSA programs. That was your selection. If compliance status is no, complete the explanation of compliance status. Part 4 is additional LEA data is optional. And that is the end of PR 6200. Next is PR 6400, Homeless Children and Youth Served by the Texas Support for Homeless Education Program, TEX-SHUP grant. The McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act is federally funded program reauthorized by Title IX Part A of ESSA. Hereafter will be referred to as McKinney-Vento Act. This report collects the unduplicated accounts of homeless children and youth served by the McKinney-Vento grant, who are of the following age group and who are not reported in PEMS as homeless for students ages 0 to 2 and 3 to 5, which are not enrolled in pre-K or kindergarten. The purpose of the report is to count the number of students who are identified as homeless over the course of the school year, not to count the separate incidences of homelessness. Part 1, Homeless Students Participation. Click yes or no to indicate whether the LEA provided services to homeless students through McKinney-Vento. This grant is now being administered by Region 13. Selecting yes makes Part 2 required to submit the report. Part 2 counts as a primary nighttime residency. If your organization had homeless students served by McKinney-Vento, enter the number of students for each category. The data for this report are the total numbers of homeless children and youth enrolled in the district at any point during the school year by grade level and by primary nighttime residence at the time of the initial identification. This report collects the unduplicated counts of homeless children and youth served by the McKinney-Vento, who are in the following age group and who are not reported in PEMS as homeless for students ages 0 to 2 and 3 to 5, not enrolled in pre-K or kindergarten. Unduplicated homeless count. These numbers must be an unduplicated count of homeless students enrolled at any time during the compliance report grant year. Provide the total count of homeless children and youth that were served by McKinney-Vento. Provide the total count of homeless children and youth served by McKinney-Vento as unaccompanied youth. Next, unduplicated number of homeless students at any time during the year by primary nighttime residence. For each primary nighttime residence category, input the number of homeless students served by McKinney-Vento. In each grade level, the sum of the number of homeless children and youth in shelters, doubled up, unsheltered, and hotels and motels. These must equal the total number of homeless children and youth served by the McKinney-Vento grant. Part 3 is an additional LEA data, which is optional. Use a space to describe any inconsistencies or unusual circumstances encountered. And that is the end of PR 6400 homeless. Next will be Lauren McKinney.
Okay, we are going to close out with the PR 3001. Now, one of the things it's important to note right away is you will not find this inside of the 2018-2019 ESSA Consolidated Compliance Report. You will instead have to go back to your compliance report screen and scroll down about halfway. You'll see here your 18-19 PR 3001, which is also known as your Needs Assessment, Priorities, and Program Outcomes Compliance Report. Keeping in mind that this is what started off as the PS/SC 3001 3 years back, because this is the third year that we're going into this. It has mutated. At one point, it was originally a part of the application, then it became a special collection, and now it's kind of somewhere halfway in between the two. But what's important to note is that this is your needs assessment at the LEA level. This is not specific to a campus. It is what you are doing as an organization to combat the needs that you have within your LEA. So the first portion here, your TEA strategic priorities, number 1 through 4, they just recapped them in case you need to see them again. Priority 1, recruit, support, and retain your teachers and principals. 2, your foundation of reading and math. 3, connecting high school to career and college. And then 4, improving low performing schools. Now, I guess before I even go into number one, if you have not done the SC 3001 from 2018, you will not have any data that pre-populates. So you would have to go back and then put something in your SC 3001, but then eGrants itself. If you do not see any data here, the reason why is because you did not have anything in the initial SC 3001, which was due, I want to say last December, like 18th or something like that, of 2018. If you didn't do that, you will see data pre-populated here. Thanks to Carrollton Farmers Branch ISD, we are inside of their eGrants file, which is why you do see a goal here. So under ESSA, the goals that you indicated would pre-populate here, and then you'll just update whether or not you've actually achieved the goal or if you're still working towards it. So the sample that we have here, the percentage of 3rd to 12th grade students who met the approaches standard on STAR reading or ELA ELC will increase from 73% to 75% by May 2019. This baseline data was the data that they inputted in the SC 3001 last year. The 3 to 5 year data, that's 79%. That again is the data percentage that they inputted themselves as their target percentage that as an LEA, they're committed to working towards for the next 3 to 5 years. That's where these figures come from. This is based on the information that you inputted in the original SC 3001. Continuing on, Part A, did the LEA meet this 1 year performance measure or SMART goal? So this is either a yes or a no. In this instance, either they hit that initial SMART goal of 75%, which was the percentage here, or they did not. If they did not, you'd select no. But then from here, you would have to input in a succinct way because there are character limitations. Something that's specific to what indicators of progress you have made, even though you have not hit your overall annual goal of the 75%. Let's say you came in at 74% for this example. They would expect you to insert something here just saying what other progress you've made to prove that you are moving towards hitting that 3 to 5 year goal of the 79% passage percentage. B, will the LEA continue the performance measure or SMART goal in 1920? That's a yes or no. C, will the LEA change your ESSA, Perkins, School Improvement, or your RLIS funded programs or activities in 1920 based on the progress that you've already made towards the SMART goal and the direction you're trying to go towards meeting that SMART goal? And that again is a yes or no. If you've decided to modify it, so let's say you said, no, I'm not going to continue this, it would ask you, why? And if you're going to say, yes, I'm going to go ahead and continue this, you would insert here if you're going to modify the program at all, okay? Moving down to number 2, their second performance measure or SMART goal that they inserted in the initial SC 3001 was specific to Perkins. By 1920, 100% of CFB seniors will meet the state's CCMR standard. Their baseline data that they inputted was 75%. Their 3 to 5 year goal was 100%. 2A, B, C, and D are the same as what we just looked at in number 1. It's going to ask you, did you meet the SMART goal for the performance measure for this year? Yes or no. If it was a no, you indicate what measure progress measure you've obtained as you're moving towards hitting that 3 to 5 year goal. Are you going to continue it into 1920? Yes or no. Are you going to change any of your funded programs or activities to support it? Yes or no. And if you're going to review or modify, you would insert here what you're doing to review and or modify meeting that SMART goal for the 3 to 5 years and then also for the upcoming 1920 year. Moving into part 2, the strategic priorities. Total funds budgeted. So what you see here are the funds that they have available to them for their programs. So ESSA is the $5,446,101, and for Perkins, they had available $246,547. Number 2 asks, did the LEA spend at least 90% of the funds budgeted in 1819 on activities aligned to the strategic priorities? So what they're asking is, of that $5,046,101 that were allocated under ESSA to them, to the LEA, and of the $246,547,000 allocated, did at least 90% of what you set aside specific to achieving these goals were they spent towards meeting your 3 to 5 year and your annual program measure? They're not asking you, did you spend 90% of that 5 million? Let's say CFP set aside 200,000 towards meeting their overall SMART goals that they have set 1 and 2. That's what it's asking. It's not saying that I spend 90% of the 5 million. It's that I spend 90% of what I set aside in order to achieve the strategic SMART goals that you set aside as an organization back at the beginning of 18. So if you said no, I did not actually meet that 90% spending threshold of what I set aside. And number 3, you have to insert why not? Why is there a difference between what you actually set aside and anticipated using, which is what you indicated in the initial SC 3001, from what you actually spent? Again, it is not asking, and I know it's a little confusing because if you look here, you're like, oh, well, it says 5 million. I should have spent 90% of the 5 million. That's not correct. This is a little misleading the way the form pre-populates for you. It's 90% of whatever you set aside from ESSA in order to meet your SMART goal. So in this instance here, the 3rd to 12th grade students who met that approaches standard on reading, or 90% of what you set aside from Perkins in order to meet the goal of the CFB seniors meeting the state CCMR standard. Please do not get confused by that. Part 3, your recommended usage of funds. So let's say that as an organization, your 3 to 5 year goal and your annual goal fell under strategic priority 1. So we were committed as an organization to addressing recruitment, support of our faculty, and then retaining your teachers and your principals. So what they're asking you here is, did you use any of these funding sources in a way that would support the recommended usage of funds that TEA has pre-populated here? It is not saying that you had to use these per se. It's just asking, did you use the funding that you had set aside to actually address the recommended usage of funds? So did I use some of my Perkins funding for principal support and supervision? If I did, I clicked the box. Did I use any of my Title I Part A? Did I use any of my Title I Part C? If I did, I clicked the box. Keep in mind, again, this is not saying that you had to do this, because in the original SC 3001, you had a choice. You could say, I'm going to do other activities. These are recommended usage of funds, okay? Same thing with number 2. Did I use any of these funding sources? And you see this is grayed out because Perkins is not allowable usage of funding for these initiatives here. But did I use any of these Title I Part A funding or the Title II Part A funding to address high quality full day pre-K initiatives? If you did not, leave it alone. If I did not, I click no. And it's going to say, am I sure? Yes, I want to continue. And it grays out this entire box for me. If I didn't focus on connecting high school to career and college, I could again say no, and it will gray out all these options for me. But let's say I did continue some stuff and some goals as relates to ESSA, Perkins, or your RLIS with improving low performing schools in mind. I could again select, okay, I did this one, I didn't do this one, I did that one, maybe use a little funding here. You're just indicating if you utilize the funding that was provided to you for strategic priorities 1 through 4, and did I do recommended usage of funds as I did so. If you didn't, it doesn't penalize you to say no, okay? It's just asking what you did. At the bottom of this, of course, you would select what contact is yours, and then you would save it. As a reminder, if you're going to update your goals and objectives, make sure you just kind of indicate here when I said no, I'm not going to continue it. It'll allow you, when the SC 3001 comes out again in the fall, the option of saying this is what we're doing next. So this is purely a reflection of the status that you have at this point as you are working towards this annual goal and your 3 to 5 year goal as an organization, as an entire LEA for the 18-19 year. At this point, we are concluding our 2018-2019 ESSA Consolidated application. Oh, not the application, the compliance report training. Sorry about that, guys. I'm starting you over. If you have any additional questions or you need to contact us, please do not hesitate to reach out to your Region 10 Special Revenue Services team. We are glad that you allow us the opportunity to either function as your fiscal agent or the opportunity to provide additional technical support, assistance, or training to you. Thank you for your time. Have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.